Hey everyone, good morning from Los Angeles. It's Monday, and I'm Seth Schachner, host of Breaking Down the Biz. This is our early week mini-sode when we try and touch on hot topics in news and media, entertainment, and tech. And, I was mostly looking at other things this weekend, and all of a sudden a judge has issued a temporary halt to basically Hollywood's biggest merger. This is the Paramount-Warner merger. Some of the folks out here are calling it Warner Mount. And the judge, in the case it's a U.S. federal judge, kind of telegraphed that she would put a halt, or at least put the merger discussions on hold, and that's in fact what happened today. It's a very interesting situation. A dozen states have actually sued to stop the merger on the grounds that it's anti-competitive and it focuses power and content around one big interest, and it has all sorts of effects over things from pay TV operators to films and theaters and movie distribution and even losing voices. And I think it's a very legitimate concern. And at the same time, Paramount, like the strategy or not to take over Warner, I think is also legitimately and very rightfully saying that, in today's media and tech environment, you need to be big to compete with the likes of Netflix and YouTube and Prime and Disney. And I think that's what they're thinking about, actually. And I don't actually take issue with that philosophy. So probably going to sound like a lawyer, which I'm not, but it feels to me like both sides are actually, right in many respects. So I think the thing that's going to be kind of tough here is that, when these disputes happen, they're going to delay the merger, and that could actually cause problems for it. But, I think Paramount sort of is arguing in this that, like, the talent market here in Hollywood is pretty fluent. So if you're an actor, a director, a writer, you're not exclusive to any one interest. You can kind of flow from party to party, basically. And I think they're also rightfully looking at some of these big tech titans, Amazon, MGM, which initially was sort of a curious thing for a bunch of us, but which I think is really emerging as a legitimate studio, made something called Project Hail Mary earlier this year with Ryan Gosling. And that was for sure a hit. And you go back to what Apple did with Brad Pitt and F1. So there are hits coming out of some of these big tech titans. And I imagine if you're a studio, you're looking at them with a lot of worry because they can, spend money and attract talent and certainly compete with you. So I think there's some very legitimate points that Paramount's thinking about in this dispute, basically, as to why they want to keep doing the merger. So these are very legitimate concerns. But at the same time, Warner shareholders actually approve this transaction and probably agree with some of the thinking that's coming from Paramount. So I think that's a very legitimate set of arguments that are being made. On the side of the U.S. states, California, where I'm based, and Attorney General Rob Bonta, I think, are sort of leading the charge for all of the states here. But, they're also saying that things like F1 don't just exist in a vacuum. They're getting to theaters in part because Warner, which is a big distributor, is actually helping. And that's a very legitimate point. It might not have gotten so big without the help of a Hollywood studio. So why would you want to help one of these in a very stable environment die, basically, or flow in? So they're sort of arguing that collapsing studios is going to hurt consumers, less choice, lead to higher prices. The other issue that, I don't know, I haven't seen it in the news today, but call it monopsony, which is just the loss of voices. We're going to lose a talent acquisitor here. If you're selling your script, your acting, your editing, your above or below the line services, would be one less party to sell it to. So that's a real consideration as well. And then, there's the UK is still looking at this. So it's plausible that they could pull pieces out of the deal. There's been a lot of focus around children's programming, for those of us of a certain age, and we've had prior episodes looking at MTV and what MTV had. Nickelodeon is part of MTV Networks, and it's possible that could get pulled out of the deal, or there'll be some commitments that are made to appease the English, actually, who I think are being tough on this. So long story short, this thing is going to go on halt for a bit. I think it's a 14-day stay period. I think Paramount had indicated they wanted to close this by July 22nd, which is Thursday this week, Wednesday this week. It's not going to happen, actually. There'll be delays. And I think probably some of the concern here is when you start having these early stage regulatory delays, it can sometimes be a very, very bad sign. So if it gets too difficult, I wouldn't be surprised if Paramount changes its thinking. But I think for right now, I'm still expecting it to go through. There's been one other thing that's come up, and it seems like it's a negotiating point, but it's very serious, which is that supposedly Paramount threatened to leave California and move its headquarters out of here, which would be, kind of an earthquake, if you will, in some respects, because it's such a Hollywood-based studio. I think it's been reported that Tennessee's film people have been pitching Paramount to change its headquarters to Nashville. I think there's been some commitments in New Jersey they've made, so there's been talk about that. It's hopefully just a negotiating tactic. And again, I still think the deal will close, but I bet there'll be some delays on it because it is complicated. It's a huge enterprise that's being put together, and there's a lot of cost cuts and tough challenges in front of it. So those are my thoughts. We'll keep on it. We got another episode coming later this week. Hope we all turn into to breaking down the biz. Thank you, everyone, for listening today.